it is my pleasure to announce our next opening remarks with Laura Barracal from Verizon.
All right, how's everyone doing? So talk about getting energy up. This morning, I was home with 3 children, last day of school. I think they were super energized. I was quietly having a panic attack inside, thinking that they're going to be here for like the next few weeks. But I love my kids, but it's a lot of work when they're home. I got the moms over here, I know. So we're here to talk about the future of work. And when I think of the future of work, I feel like I tend to reminisce to 20 plus years ago, thinking about how things were done back then, and then comparing it to our current state, particularly like our technology landscape right now. And one thing that I always think about is my mom. So we've been talking a lot about entrepreneurship. Growing up, my mom actually had a cleaning business. And I remember like seeing her at the dining room table and just writing everything down, like payroll, staff, who's going to what house, who's like the contacts for all of her clients. And my sisters and I were just like, there's got to be a better way to do this. And then you fast forward to today. And yesterday, I was just at my youngest kindergarten graduation. And when they asked him what he enjoyed most about kindergarten, his response was, I really like to play on the iPad. And I really like the Lexia app, which is a reading app that they use at school. So, I think the takeaway here is that there's a huge spectrum of digital skilling trends and needs. And it ranges from your first generation small business owner that's looking to digitize their business, which we've talked a lot about today here. And then it also goes all the way up to your rising first grader that's super excited about technology, and you need to make sure you're keeping a close eye on them to make sure that relationship is a healthy one. And then you have everything in between, which is why we have all of our experts over here that are going to talk about that fun space, because there's so much going on there. So really grateful for you all to be here. Looking forward to hearing what you have to say. I will say that a lot of the work that we do at Verizon is also providing solutions to some of these challenges and opportunities, because there's both. And we do this through many different ways. One way I wanted to highlight was through our Citizen Verizon platform, where we offer a range of different digital-ready programs for small business owners. We offer it for students, as well as even the general workforce and those that are looking to re-enter the workforce, including military. And actually, right now, we're working to prepare 50,000 individuals for in-demand jobs by 2030. And we're doing that through our corporate social responsibility work. And I'm actually part of that responsible business team here in Washington, D.C. So upskilling, apprenticeships, you're going to hear a lot about it today. Our panel will be discussing that. And it really is a huge part of the future of work and creating a digital-ready workforce. And at Verizon, we certainly recognize that. We have programs like Verizon Skill Forward. We also have our Thrive Apprenticeship program. And these programs, what they do is they help individuals develop in-demand digital skills that will better position them for careers in high-growth technology fields. And so today, we're going to be talking a lot about this. And our experts I feel like they're hiding from me, like behind this pillar, but they're going to be talking about all of this. But what I would like to just take a quick moment before I introduce Laura Marestani, who is the founder and CEO at Catch Skills. She'll be moderating the conversation. I want to just recognize HTTP and the leadership within this organization. Judan, you're doing a wonderful job. Brent Wilkes, Chris, the whole team. I think each year you bring really top-notch trending issues. You bring us all together in a fun way to talk about these issues. So we're not all stressed out, but we're enjoying the conversation. So thank you for doing that. So I will introduce Laura. Or Laura, you want to come up here? You're not hiding from me.
Hi. Whoa, yeah, wake up now with my voice. So, and my shoes. It's summer. Hello, I'm from Puerto Rico. Gotta wear your colors. Rebel against the DC black suit culture. So I'm Laura Manistani. Just quickly introducing because I know I have a lot of friends in this room and some new friends. And you may not all be aware that I am building a technology startup. And so I'm especially excited to be able to moderate this conversation. For over 20 years in DC, I've been doing workforce policy, education policy, and I kind of got a little tired of waiting for things to happen, as many of us in this room. And so, looking even with some of the organizations I get to work with at economies across the country, and how we are able to really anchor some of the tools that our communities are going to need to actually move our communities forward. To me, that really was in pushing the needle, pushing the boundaries on how we think about upskilling, reskilling our communities. And that the future of work, really the present of work, is skills first. And so that to do that, we needed to be able to understand what exactly are the skills and the superpowers that our communities have, valuing them in all of the ways in which that happens, and then using that not only to grow our communities, be able to build better programs that are future ready, hashtag futuro ready, HTTP, but also that these that employers are able to value all of those ways, that government is able to understand what we actually should be preparing our communities for, et cetera. And that's where, to me, Catch Skills is a part of that movement. It is a tool that will help us be able to capture all our learning moments and turn them into skills. So I'm really, really excited to be able to be surrounded by folks that are not only on the ground building these kinds of programs for our communities, also thinking about the policy implications and other different ways that we can bring solutions to the table to make sure that our communities have access to the best jobs, and to be able to really anchor a lot of that talent to build technology economies. So I'm going to ask our awesome speakers today to quickly introduce themselves and tell us a bit about what brings them to today's conversation. So, Tony, if you want to jump in.
Antonio Tijerino with the Hispanic Heritage Foundation, and we focus on education, workforce development, as well as social impact and leadership. Great to be here. I'm actually on the board of HCTP, and I see a few fellow board members. Julian's back there. I see Brent and Julian. Appreciate your leadership. And I also see a lot of my partners here who are my leaders as well that we partner with in terms of Joanna, and I see Celeste and others that are here. And of course, Laura, thank you for the introduction. Good to make eye contact with you as we were trying to hide behind that pillar. But yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
And my name is Helder Tossi. I'm the Government Affairs Director for the Libre Initiative. We are a grassroots Hispanic advocacy group. We are in 12 states with staff, but we operate on a 50-state strategy at the federal level. And in particular, we focus on economic, healthcare, and immigration policy, and the nexus on how that all relates directly to the Latino community. I was hiding, though, because I have a face for radio, so I apologize for all of you in advance, but excited to be a part of the conversation. And I'll take also some questions in the back later if you have any questions.
Awesome. So jumping right in, obviously, a big part of how we're thinking about what happens in DC, how it impacts our communities. Everybody's talking about the rapid transitions happening in our economy, especially as it relates to AI and how it's transforming how we have to think about developing that next generation of talent. So I wonder, maybe starting with you, Tony, what does it look like for organizations like yours that have been on the ground doing a lot of this work? What are things that are working? What are things that we should be doing in helping bring our folks to good jobs in technology?
Thank you, Laura. I think that it all starts with one statistic that the Bureau of Labor Statistics has, that 78% of all new jobs will be filled by a Latino over the next 5 years. There is no work around the Latino community. These aren't DEI initiatives. This is critical for the United States to move forward and the globe to move forward. So we have to fill these jobs, and we have to be prepared to fill them in a way that fills these gaps that we have in our workforce. And then it ties into everything else from economic mobility and everything else. The programs that we've been doing, and I've recognized some of my partners that are here in the audience, but we're teaching 100,000 young people how to code, for instance. We have other programs in terms of being able to flip someone from making minimum wage to making $80,000 a year in the tech space. That skills building is something that you can learn at any point of your career and allows you to continue learning for the rest of your life. And I know that you're going to have other questions in terms of the importance of certifications and stackable credits and boot camps and everything else. But I can just tell you, as an organization that is conducting this kind of work, it's really important for our community to democratize access to tech jobs.
Well, and I want to go back a little bit to the topic of demography. 1 out of every 4 kids under the age of 18 in this country is Hispanic, even though we're only around 19% of the population. So not only are a vast majority of the jobs that are about to get filled are going to be filled by Latinos, just like us, but a lot of the future jobs are going to get filled by Latinos. And we're not talking just in the next 5 years. We're talking 10, 15 years. Just last year alone, the plurality now of the population in Texas is Hispanic. And a really good example of AI and a lot of where we're going with the data industry is it's going to require a lot of energy, right? It's going to require people that understand how to do a lot of these energy jobs. And so the work being done at the grassroots level is going to not only help us meet some of those labor shortages, but most importantly, we have a lot of gaps to fill. In Texas, only about 40%, 30%, depending on where in the state, of energy jobs go to Hispanics, even though we're a larger portion of the population. And so even in industries that are really ready to go, we're underrepresented. And I think that goes to a lot of what needs to be done long term to make sure that we have a seat at the table.
Yeah, and so I think starting maybe from industry, what is the responsibility of industry in helping to prepare communities for the future of work, and in particular in some of the areas and with the communities that we're talking about?
I think has to be a collaboration. I think some of the things that you're dealing with are, do people trust some of these certifications and workarounds of the 4-year degree? And part of that will be taken away if you are building a program with your partner. So for instance, with IBM, we have a skills build program that directly, once we get our community to go through the program, they are placed into a job or into job boards with their clients or with IBM directly. That is something that, in my mind, I always think of that tia or tío that you're walking down the street with and they see a broken toaster that's laying on the side of the street. And they pick it up and next thing you know, you're toasting bread the next day. That is critical thinking, that is problem solving, that's going to lend itself a lot better than my journalism degree in college does towards a job in technology. And so we need to take away that snobbery, as well as making sure that we understand that the Latino community needs to fill the technology jobs, not just the jobs that are often thought of when you think of the importance of our community to the workforce. We're across everything, including in entrepreneurship and in research and other areas. But I think that it's critical that we work with our partners, corporate partners, along with the nonprofits. And I see Brent here from Hispanic Federation too. It's our priority in terms of the workforce part, because that then feeds economic mobility, that addresses housing issues. Everything can be addressed simply by having the skills that you need for the jobs that you have today. But I think the important part is to actually build these models with the sponsors, because they also have very specific needs that they're trying to fill. And it's very myopic to look at it as, I'm looking for someone that can do this specific job, building car batteries, for instance, in Kansas City. You better build a pipeline in order to support that in a sustainable way, as opposed to just trying to cherry pick off of who is already an expert in this space.
And I want to start, I guess, with more of a hot take, which is you should work with the government, but don't trust the government to help you with all these sort of initiatives you're trying to do. Whenever administrations at the federal or even state level change, or even municipality, some of these public-private partnerships that you've heard kind of talked about, they can go away, they can lose funding, they can change. And so your best partner often is going to be another business community, a trade association, a local school, and a lot of parents as well well are now looking for more options for their kids. And so, for example, in Arizona, the country's most preeminent state when it comes to the topic of like school choice, there are STEM Latino specific schools popping up in South Phoenix, in the Tucson area as well. And a lot of those don't necessarily have corporate or entrepreneurial partners. I'm from the Central Valley of California, where I grew up on a dairy farm. And our high school, since about 60 years ago, offered immediate courses at the high school freshman level for technical education in welding, woodworking, farm and industrial management, under supervision, of course. But the really important thing is, in my area, there was an acknowledgement early on that the Latino community was growing. We wanted kids to stay in the agriculture industry that offers, especially in things like welding and irrigation, really high paid jobs. We don't necessarily want them to move away. That's the other thing in states like Arizona, you have large Hispanic populations. They don't want to leave Arizona. It's an amazing state, but it's really going to depend on you guys to partner locally with reliable long-term partners, AKA not the government, to build for long-term 5, 10, 15-year solutions. And a lot of the companies represented here, I know are already doing a lot of this incredible work, but also it's going to take, sometimes you have to search out these opportunities yourselves. A charter school won't know to partner you even if they have a robust STEM program if you don't take the time to sit with them, to coalition build, to relationship build. And part of it too, when we think about Latinos, we've said, a lot of the big states, but 8% of Alaska, almost 10% is already Hispanic. 15% of Wisconsin by the end of the decade will be Hispanic. So states that traditionally are not Hispanic states are being filled in their job labor by Latinos. And often too, in states like the Dakotas, we've had over a 200% increase in the last decade in Latinos. So even in places where, immediately, you think, well, should we be working in those states? Should we be finding those state level, local, municipal, or even corporate partners to build some of these pipelines? The answer is yes. And you should go search them out, because at the end of the day, if you want to expand your business beyond maybe some of your traditional states or market economies, you should be doing that and pursuing that as well.
So if I could just add, though, first of all, I'm glad to see you have all your digits, so you were properly supervised in terms of your
That's true. Yeah.
your woodshop classes and everything else. But it's in some of these programs in high school, for instance, CS course, computer science courses are not being offered. Even now that they've made leaps and bounds in terms of getting better at it, you still have about 60% of high schools have computer science courses. And only about 6% of students actually take them. So you can lay them out. This means that you're at a deficit by the time you get out. And you're talking about the Latino community, it is even more stark. And then it's almost 27% of all students are Latino right now. And it gets bigger the younger and younger that they are. And across the different industries too, they're all tech industries. Because I don't care if it's in agriculture or welding or any other, I don't care if you're at a bakery, it's tech-based. And that's why we're working on programs like Code as a Second Language and others, because you want to make sure that computational thinking, critical thinking, problem solving, being able to make mistakes and then see where that takes you in terms of creating and fomenting more innovation within our community. I mean, we are the solution to America going forward, especially in the workforce. So I'm glad to hear that you were talking about places like Arizona, but we need to step up in terms of our schools providing access to computer science education.
And I think obviously the topic is super important around how are we thinking about those future generations of workers. I also want to kind of call out the fact that when we're talking about future and present of work, we're not only talking about what pathways are we building, right, for our folks that are in school, what they need to be learning in what context, et cetera. And obviously technology being a big part of that. But the opportunity here is we have to be thinking about it for everybody, all the way to, single mom who is a seamstress, learning to code at 40 years old and coming back into the workforce, earning 3 times her salary, et cetera. When we are talking about alternative pathways, when we are talking about all the different ways in which we need to be training our workforce, we're talking about, from babies all the way to retirement, and really thinking through what are the multiple pathways in which that needs to happen from boot camps, apprenticeships, certifications, all of those things. So I think like transitioning a little bit to that, you know, there are plenty of programs out there and growing that are trying to upskill and reskill, but we still see a little bit of a lack of valuing of those different pathways. So I wonder, you know, what do we need to do to help employers value all of these different ways in which we have to train our workers these days?
I'll start just in terms of what I was saying earlier. We have to work with those partners to build out the curriculum that they want to put forth. That collaboration means that they're responsible for what the future workforce is being trained to do. Also, it works in their employees as a part of the solution. You also need to make sure that you have what's the baseline. What are you going to look at in terms of criteria with some of these programs? That'll help the level of comfort as well. And also in terms of the data that's being pushed out from it and what criteria are you meeting and how visible is it in terms of being able to discuss the credentials from a data point.
Well, and I'm going to take the conversation broadly to credentialing as a whole. It is not necessarily a federal issue. It is a local and state issue. I'm going to kind of talk about electricians here, which feels a little random, but we need them for all of the digital data, et cetera, that we are planning to build and use and kind of develop with AI. Who here in the room actually knows an electrician personally in their family? Can you raise your hand? Okay, amazing. Shocker, you work in this industry, right? But we're about to see in the next 5-10 years that about 30% of unionized electrician workers are going to retire. And we have over 150,000 spots open in that industry, right? In electrician work as a whole. But let's imagine, to Laura's point, you're 40 plus, 50 plus, trying to maybe reskill yourself for this program, or you're a young person about to go to decide if you're going to do a technical program or go to college. If you're going to the state of Washington, for example, to become an apprentice, you need to do over 4,000 hours of supervised labor to be an apprentice. That is 100 weeks, which is over 2 years, just for entry level. But if you go to the state of West Virginia, for example, it only takes 1,000 hours for apprenticeship. If you go to Arizona, it actually depends on your county or municipality that determines how quickly you can be receive your certification. So if you're trying to, let's say, retrain a mine worker, right, or someone in West Virginia, and you take them at the age of 50 and try to make them an electrician to have more of a broad-based market availability to support sort of this energy industry that we're building through the digital revolution, it's still gonna take 2 years to certify that person properly. And you have to make the case sometimes to your local stakeholders to either offer tax incentives to the trainers, to other partners as well, to then incentivize developing those skill sets. But then a lot of times, if you don't do it on the front end with the pilot program through your own investment, you can't justify to them why they should give you the money or the tax credit to continue building the workforce. And that's one of the really big challenges. On the federal level, one of the things we're going to encourage all of you to do is working with your members of Congress. And in particular, there's a thing called the appropriations process, where different stakeholders can pull together a proposal for the federal government to get federal money. And a lot of times that money can go to pilot programs in the workforce development space. And so that's one of the ways that you could try to create value to other stakeholders and to access some of the money that is going to be out there anyway for you to start building an environment to get to the future of work.
And I want to go back, Laura, just to that building trust and the non-degrees. A couple of other things that I want to mention is kind of standardizing the outcomes of things like standards for what graduates know and what they can do. Also, being able to measure graduation rates and job placement rates and how much they're making and employer satisfaction with the hires. And something as simple as just the narrative, just being able to tell success stories about people pivoting in these career paths like you were just talking about. And that's very, very helpful when you can talk about someone that was working from home or had a job making minimum wage and then is able to then transition to these spaces. And then we also have to establish like credential frameworks too in terms of working with organizations that have the transparency in terms of what they actually learned and what they're actually capable of. So there are a lot of different levels that we need to do.
So I think all super important points, for, I think since 2016, at the time I led a pretty large strategy around reducing hyperpartisanship in America at a major foundation. And one of the core things that we saw across the country was this anxiety with technology in communities, in particular in Middle America, that were transitioning from one economy to another. And we could track back a lot of that to workforce investment boards and other structures that had been set up to help guide what the future of those communities needed to look like. And so I think that in particular, a really good example on the policy side, right? When we have a little bit of a delay, what can happen in communities that are trying to keep up, that are trying to create opportunity, that are trying to decide where the funding is going to go to support these initiatives, that are telling universities what they should be teaching, et cetera, et cetera. So we have right now some monumental conversations happening in Congress and at the state level, some pretty drastic big policy shifts. And so I wonder if we can talk a little bit, and maybe Helder, we start with you in terms of what is in things like the big bill that are meant potentially to enable rapidly developing the future of work or transitioning, et cetera. Like what are some of the things that are included in the current versions of the bill that we should be looking at?
Yeah, so the bill, aka the one big beautiful bill, if you've been online, don't do it, go offline. It's a terrible place. But the bill essentially, because it's a reconciliation process, what it really means is each committee had to find ways to save money, change rules in the fiscal sense, to in particular try to redo the tax cuts from 2017. But in particular, from the labor development side, there have been changes to the Pell Grants. Pell Grants are very, very important, but right now there's a lot of special interests in the room with those grants that have made it not necessarily as successful of a program as a lot of us would like it to be. And part of it is because Pell Grants, for example, they're capped at around $9,000, $10,000, depending if you're eligible. But at the time, up until this changes, and we don't know if it's going to go through all the way, but one of the changes is even if you were a part-time student, not being held accountable to any end result, you were still getting the grant. And so community schools and universities and state schools were able to take the money, not necessarily deliver for the worker, the student, and there was no incentive really for them to prepare that person full term. And so some of the changes that they're making is they're going to pull back some of the money on the Pell Grants as far as that goes. But what they are doing also is they're changing it so individuals entering 2-year, 3-year, 4-year apprenticeship programs have more accessibility to those grants. And other changes they're trying to do is make sure that the program stays solvent. So Pell Grants obviously are a spend. A lot of the changes in the Pell Grant payouts are going to go to shore up the program to keep it viable long term. But that's one of the examples of the government, giving out a grant to students that often a university or a school will say, well, how much money are you getting? We're going to use that into your financial aid. At Libre, we don't really believe that that's the right way it should go. Universities should not look at the Pell Grant as part of your financial aid package. It should be money that you're able to use to buy the computer that you need to go to class. To be able to, for example, I grew up in a very low-income part of California. My typing, my sort of word usage, PowerPoints when I went to college was not where it needed to be. There were courses available. There were $500. I couldn't afford those. And so you depend on sort of the university maybe having some tutoring program. We want to change, at least on our side, the way that we do that so that the focus is more on the student, the individual that is receiving the grant. Full disclosure, you can be 40, 50 plus to receive that grant and use that grant if you've never used it before for a rehiring and retraining program. But we want to make sure that you're able to keep the money and use it in the way that is best fit for you and your needs in your program. Because, for example, if you're becoming, once again, an electrician, you may not need the same thing as someone going into the humanities or a legal program for retraining. And making sure that we have more flexibility in the way that those grants are used and that they're used by the people that they're intended for and not the institutions providing services that maybe they're not accountable for. It is a big tension, but it's an important conversation. because at the end of the day, it's you guys that need to be able to use and work with these programs to advance the needs of the workforce of the future.
I'm actually a little skeptical about the part where they're trying to make the Pell Grants less available for someone that is part-time or less than half-time or doesn't have a full credit hours in terms of when they're in college. And that worries me because our community is, like you were saying, is often going to be working 3 jobs while they're trying to make their way through college. I know I did when I was in college, so it took me a while to graduate because I was working. So it for them not to be available because you are working full-time while you're trying to go to school, so therefore your hours are half, means you're not available. The Pell Grants may not be available. That's the part that worries me about it.
And there's a lot of employer coalitions, particularly some of the ones that support skills first solutions, which obviously is what we're talking about here, in trying to help enable things like Pell Grants being able to use in more flexible ways so that folks that may not necessarily be in full-time programs, et cetera, are able to use them. You know, some of the conversations here that we're also having in terms of those multiple pathways, I don't know that we've specifically called them out, whether it's, non-degree programs or stackable credentials or coding and boot camps. Apprenticeship obviously being a big one. We've touched a little bit on how do we get employers to value some of those pathways. Obviously, in places like Europe, people that you can either choose to do an apprenticeship or you can, go do a degree, and both are equally valid, right? Both are equally respected, I think is the answer here that we're trying to get to. So we are at a moment right now where AI and the rapid pace of technology is obviously creating massive shifts in how we have to think about upskilling, reskilling, valuing all of these alternative pathways. Specifically about when we talk about our community, what specific strategies should we be looking at during this transformation? And Tony, I think can we talk a little bit about how you've tackled some of these issues and conversations?
Thank you. We have to remember that AI isn't necessarily going to replace human beings. You still need critical thinking, emotional intelligence, collaboration, as well as some of the soft skills in order to do this. It should be an enhancement of our jobs. In some cases, there's the evolution of the workforce. But at the same time, we also want to take away biases in AI and other things, and you need a human being to be able to do that. We actually are launching a program in 20 different states in terms of teaching AI credentialed for middle school and high school students. It's all a pathway program. We're also trying to use video gaming as a way to meet students where they want to be in terms of learning. Let's not forget either the importance of having teachers prepared and trained in order to teach the students, because that's the other thing too. You can have all the interests that you want or talk about the importance of computer science in different schools that aren't there. Well, if you don't have the teachers to teach it, that's going to be a problem too. So I think it's laying the groundwork to be able to help folks make those pivots. And I'll go back again that the onus for me, I work mostly with corporate partners. So the onus is going to be on the corporate partners to work with nonprofits that are in this space like us to be able to build the curriculum that you want to see and to build that pipeline very specifically to what your needs are. Makes it easier too, because they're going to be funneled right into something that's very specific to your industry or your sector.
I think I'm going to pivot the conversation more to talking about cultural stigma that we have within the Latino community about what sort of options or programs are available in a modern economy. My parents are both immigrants, and my dad grew up, like I said, running a dairy farm and doing that. My mom had a small business. And when I grew up, I was very lucky they let me into Yale. And my parents had no clue what a Yale was. And they thought it was a school and it was just far away, and that apparently smart kids went to it and you should go do that. And one of the stigmas, though, is my parents kind of didn't really understand what degree I wanted to do. So this is the part where it gets complicated. I was a double major. One is history of art. And my parents did not immigrate to this country for a starving artist, is what they would remind me over and over. But that's kind of what's happening in the 21st century. Well, mom and dad, it's history of art. It's really just history. It's humanities. There's a lot of critical thinking that comes to the course as far as like memorization, information processing, et cetera. They're like, okay, but does it pay the bills? And that's one of the biggest issues. We have a lot of parents, especially immigrant, even second generation parents, that are currently maybe in the construction sector or these really, physical labor jobs. They don't understand totally what a coding is, right? We have to turn the internet on and off, perhaps, is what they'll ask you when the computer's not working. And when we don't talk to them and explain, hey, your child that we're building all these programs for, or you as an adult, that you have these great skills, we need to retrain you. These are all the jobs that are available out there, opportunities. What does good look like? Good, more and more often, is not necessarily a 4-year program and a master's. It does for some degrees, but you can go to a technical program that's 2-3 years and go into, once again, electrician work. By the way, they're not paying me or anything to say that. It's just a really good example. Or construction, for example, where 1 out of every 5 people is about to retire from that industry, and say, you as a person have dignity. There is dignity also in this work. By the way, we're going to fold in digital skills so you can get paid at a respectable wage for that work that you're contributing. But if you don't start with the parents, sometimes these PTO associations or parent-teacher groups that are community-oriented, and educate them about what pathways are there, they don't know how to properly support their students. So even when we offer sometimes really great programs for students or local individuals that maybe are fresh out of high school, and there's no pressure sometimes to do those programs because we haven't explained to them the value, that's, I think, where one of the biggest misses is. And I can talk about my personal family to finish. My little brother, he really doesn't want to go to school. He doesn't enjoy it. But he has been promoted like 4 times at Chick-fil-A. He's super, super smart. And he got so into using the computers at Chick-fil-A for a lot of the mechanical stuff. Now he's entering an IT program 3 years later. And it's like, did we give him a hard time for working at Chick-fil-A? No, we gave him a hard time for not working, right? And my parents were like, I don't care what you do, you got to go work. But by getting him out there exposed, he found something he liked, and now he's going to want to do that, and he's back in school for it. And so part of it too is not every kid is going to go straight into the sector, every school, but it's about having an environment and a culture where we tell that person that, take some time, find what you need to do, but then really own it to continue to advance not just yourself financially, but also the future selves. You're when you get married and you have kids, or you do none of those things and you just do what I do, which is go on vacation all the time. So every one of these avenues is worthy. It's full of dignity. And we should encourage people to do what's best for them, and maybe not what's best for a special interest group, whoever that may be.
And we have more and more parents are showing up to the coding programs that we do, by the way.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Just to let you know, we do include the parents in everything that we do.
So important. Part of a lot of the organizations that I work with, Black Girls Code and some of the other programs that look similar to yours, that physical space to help not only bring the kids, but their families and parents, and helping to make sure that they understand what the opportunities are in this space are so important and core to be able to get that kind of transformation, that kind of input into that kind of, I guess, like what we're talking about, the valuing those alternate pathways. I was just, one of the programs I'm working on, we did a conversation last week with the music industry. And so I think that's a really good example of, Helder, some of what you're talking about. Most parents think, so let's take Puerto Rico, all the kids in Puerto Rico want to be Bad Bunny. And so, right, the perspective on that is, well, you have to learn how to, build lyrics. You may have to learn how to play an instrument. But in reality, to be in music, most of the opportunity is actually in tech. So you need to learn how to code to be able to actually get a really good job in the industry. And so part of the conversation there has been, well, how do you go out to schools? How do you work with some of the, folks that are helping those communities understand what the future of work are? I think that goes back to the policy. And so kind of closing out, going back to what we're seeing in DC, a lot of the conversation on, when I say policy, I don't necessarily mean that that there's a bill that you're tracking, but really thinking through, like, what are the things that we should be doing to make sure that our communities understand the multiple opportunities that exist how they are different, and how they can catalyze that. And that goes wrapping up also all the conversations that we've had today. Valid pathways are opening your own small business. Valid pathways are going to work at a 9 to 5. It's doing freelance. It's becoming, looking at work in a different way. So I'd like for both of you to just give our folks, that are in this room, I think, because they want to be able to take something back with them and do something with it. Like, what would you tell them that they should be doing?
1 out of 4 states require computer science as part of your being able to graduate. That's a problem. If we want to compete with China and all these other countries, we need to start that foundation at a younger starting point. In terms of math, CS, computer science doesn't even count as a math or a science requirement in most schools right now. So that's some area that needs to change. Also, we need to be more adaptive to meeting youth where they are. They're the ones who should be dictating to us where we go. Especially when you mentioned earlier, the youth, the most populated age, not the median age, but the most populated age for non-Latinos in this country is over 50. For Latinos is 14. So that demonstrates where the future is. When we talk about the future of work and education, it starts with the Latino community. So that's where I would start. And the programs that we've done including the first Latino-themed Minecraft game, which had a pathways part to it. It was played by 30 million kids in 30 different languages. So we have to adapt to the workforce as well as to the workers. And in this case, it's a very young demographic.
Well, and I'll answer it in 2 ways. One is the federal side. The federal government, the best way they can actually support your industry and the pathways of jobs you're trying to create is by unleashing American energy, really. Because it doesn't matter if we train all these people to go work at data centers if they don't exist, right? It's expected that AI-related industries are going to use between 10 to 15% of our country's energy in the next decade. And we need to scale up in all of the above energy solution to be able to meet that. And that's going to require investments into everything from nuclear to solar to wind, et cetera, to be able to have the energy capacity to then make sure that the industry of tomorrow, which we know is already really starting today, is actually where it needs to be. It also means doing things like making sure that we're expanding broadband in rural communities. A vast majority and the increasing populations in rural America, we're talking towns of 1,000 people, like the one I grew up in, are Hispanic. And they don't have reliable access to like even regular, I don't even know if it's called 4G or 5G or whatever. They don't have access to it, which means unless they're physically at school or sometimes at home where they happen to have this provider that's giving them those services, they can't even get online. And it's, shocker, very hard to code and work on programming when you don't have access to computers, but then separately when you're not online. And so that's one of the big hurdles that we need to close. Our country is massive. It's not a small place. I think sometimes we get a little jealous of Europe, but everyone lives like down the block from each other, right? It is a very long distance from Washington, D.C. to Anchorage, Alaska, or to even San Francisco. And so that's one of the hurdles we have at the federal level. So working with your member of Congress or senator, regardless of political affiliation, to make sure they're closing these gaps, crucial. And on the state level, the number one thing you can work on is credentialing. Because if we're not building and making it easier for all these incredible young people to actually get the job, and that requires working sometimes with your local union, your municipality, your state legislature, you're preparing a workforce that can't fill out the paperwork to actually have the work that we've trained them for. And we recently had a really great one in Nevada. We worked with the governor and Democrats. We actually passed a physicians reform bill to allow immigrants that were trained abroad that medically that now live in Nevada to be able to join and be certified to become doctors in Nevada to actually provide healthcare. If we're doing it for doctors, we should be able to do it for everybody else. And especially when we know that we have these massive labor gaps that are coming. And yes, it comes with retraining and state resources sometimes depending, but that's just where we're at. And I really think for the local stuff, take time to work with your schools, your school districts, but also don't forget about the people that are actually rolling out certifications for those jobs, because you can work with them to lower the requirements from 4,000 to 3,000 hours, or find other innovative ways to make it more accessible so that we can all win, no matter your age, no matter where you're from.
Thank you both. I think I'd say closing out that this is gonna be like 25 webinars, Judan. There's just a lot of information and programs and different things that we can all be doing to make sure that our communities are prepared for the future at work. So I really appreciate both of you, and thanks again.
Thank you for moderating.
Happy to do it.